Now, of course, it's a total necessary and innocent thing to do to clean our windscreens, but sometimes we don't realise the dangers we could be in when we do so. And to help explain that, I've got this very basic drawing here of a car, and we've got the washer bottle there. So let's imagine we can see through this car, the washer bottle there, and we've got the pipes that come out of the washer bottle and up there to the sprayer or the jet. And under normal circumstances, of course, we'd have this washer bottle filled with water. And of course, when the window screen needs cleaning, the operator either pulls a lever or pushes a button inside the car, and that activates this pump here, this little electric pump. I realise there's going to be a lot more involved here, but this is just the basics. And as the pump's now activated, it draws out the water out of the bottle there, and it travels up the line here, through the pipe and out here at the sprayer, and then it sprays onto the window screen. And so what I'm getting at a little bit here is that the water is now airborne. Although it's still in its water form, it's actually airborne, it's been sprayed out. And to explain why that's significant, we'll just zoom in a little bit on this washer bottle here. Okay, there we go. And let's imagine we've only got water in here without any additive. Now, what can happen if we've got water in these bottles like this, in there for days and weeks and sometimes even months on end, is that it can be a great breeding ground for bacteria. And that's because it's a nice cosy little environment in there for any bacteria, because it's protected. There's no flow of any fresh water coming through washing it away like there would be in a river or a stream or anything like that, and it's near the engine under the bonnet, so it would frequently become lukewarm under the heat from the engine, and it would be just an ideal nursery for any bacteria basically. And that means it would reproduce and build up into quite dangerous levels. And one such bacteria that's a waterborne bacteria like these, and one that's quite significant and is known to grow in water bottles like this, is the bacteria called Legionella. And this is the bacteria that causes the sometimes fatal Legionnaire's disease. Now, this bacteria is more likely to be floating on the surface rather than at the bottom of the tank here. I'm just using this as an example. But let me just explain a little something about Legionnaire's disease and why it's significant in washer bottles, and also to expel certain myths about it. You'll have to forgive my cartoon-like drawings, but Legionella, the bacteria, is actually a very natural organism, and it exists out and about, out in the countryside and out and about where we live. It exists in rivers and streams and also in lakes like this one. And it lives in these environments quite happily, just doing its own thing, eating, producing waste, producing new bacteria, and it doesn't cause a problem at all. It's just something that's natural to our planet. One quick thing I will mention now though is that this bacteria is more likely to be floating near the surface of the lake rather than deep down inside like this. In fact, people may come into contact with this bacteria more often than we think. And even when they do, it may not cause too much of a problem. Of course, I'm not suggesting that you go looking for this bacteria or deliberately come into contact with it. All I'm simply saying is that we've been living with this bacteria in our environment quite closely for thousands if not millions of years. In fact, let's just use this as an example. We've got a swimmer here having a nice open water swim, and he's swimming, or she's swimming, in this water, and in this lake there is some Legionella bacteria. And remember, this is only a very basic explanation as to what goes on between the relationship of humans and this bacteria. But let's imagine that this swimmer has swallowed some of this water, and with it has swallowed some of this Legionella bacteria, and providing the swimmer hasn't breathed it in somehow, just swallowed it and it's gone into his stomach. And so let's take a look now. This person then generally recovers without too much issue, according to a 2013 publication by the Royal Bournemouth Hospital in Dorset. And I've left a link to these websites below. Now I want to state now that I'm not saying it's like this in all cases at all. I'm simply saying that the relationship between Legionella and the stomach can be this way. And it's highly likely then that this bacteria has got into some people's stomachs and they don't even know about it, even though it can be a deadly bacteria, because we may have drank some water or ate some food or something like that with this bacteria on it. And it hasn't actually caused any problem. In fact, we won't even know we've done so maybe. So when we're about in the countryside having fun, etc., it's probably quite difficult still to come across this bacteria. Because of the sheer volume of water inside lakes and streams, our contact with it is drastically reduced. It's diluted, if you like. So if you can imagine this big lake here, these thousands and thousands, millions of tons probably of water in some lakes, and the sheer volume of that dilutes out all of the dangerous bacteria in them, especially with the Legionella. And it's the same with streams. Because we've got a fast flowing fresh stream coming down all the time with fresh water, it causes a dilution effect of that bacteria. So let's say for every cubic metre of water in a large lake, there'd be less bacteria in there than there would be in a very small lake. And so that brings me on to the next point, which is also going to bring me on to the washer bottle issue very, very shortly. Let's imagine now that that large lake is now a very little small lake, and there's no fresh water coming through it to make it fresh. So we can see there I've got a little tiny lake, almost like a puddle. Because there's no high volume of water there diluting this bacteria, and there's no fresh water coming in washing it away, it can now build up to dangerous levels and become stagnant. So if you look there, you can see there's a lot of concentration of bacteria inside that small puddle. And look what that looks like. Here we've got the washer bottle, similar situation, nicely protected, no fresh water coming through, it's going stagnant. That bacteria can build up, as I've said. And so it's obvious then that there's more bacteria inside this small pool here per square metre than there is in a huge open lake. So if this person gets into this little pool here and swallows some of the water, they are much more likely to get this bacteria in high concentrations into their stomachs than they are in a larger lake. But as I've mentioned, and in accordance with the Royal Bournemouth Hospital in Dorset, this normally resolves without disease. But so far I've only said that this bacteria can cause somebody a stomach issue and that they can get well from that, okay, generally, if they swallow it. So how does it cause Legionnaire's disease then? Well, Legionnaire's disease arises when Legionella, instead of getting into the gut, into the stomach there, gets into the lungs. And so, as opposed to getting into the stomach where it generally doesn't affect the person whatsoever, it actually causes this devastating disease when it's in the lungs. And when it gets into the lungs, it's a lung disease that we know is very similar to pneumonia-like, and that's what we call Legionnaire's disease. And the reason that this disastrous bacteria causes this disease when entering the lungs rather than the stomach is probably because it's more natural to have this bacteria in contact with our stomachs, evolutionary, than it would be in the lungs. Because let's say, for instance, for many thousands of years, if not millions of years, we've probably been swimming in water like this and developed some resistance against it when we've been swallowing the water. And of course we would have been drinking the water before we had tap water. And so that helps to explain how we get this bacteria into our stomachs. But how does it get into our lungs? Well, to get into our lungs, this bacteria must somehow become airborne in order for us to breathe it in. But that's where our modern lifestyle comes into play. The way we live in our more recent history is that we tend to use things such as showers and hose pipes and things like that that produce a projectile motion of water into the air. So it makes that water airborne. Now, of course, generally we don't have a problem with our water because the tap water is treated to get rid of such things as dangerous bacteria. But if we're getting this water from an untreated source, the same as we would if we were on the go, if we were travelling somewhere on a safari or something like that, from a tank, then it's highly likely that there could be this type of bacteria in there. And then, of course, when we come to take a shower, it's likely that we could breathe this bacteria in, and of course that's where we're getting the infection from. But of course it's not limited to showers. I was only making an example there of projectile water causing this airborne nature of this bacteria. And so let's look at the frightening significance here with the washer bottle. We've got a lovely environment there where this bacteria is growing, and then when we pull the screen wash lever or push the button, it's going to projectile all of that water out towards the windscreen with all of that bacteria in it. And so this bacteria that's been around in our environment for millions of years has benefited now from recent technology and through it has achieved airborne status. And worse still, this spray is spraying up towards the operator's face. Even though it's going on the windscreen, it's still coming up towards the operator, as well as any passengers in the car. As I've said, although there's some glass there between the operator and the spray, most people would agree that it's still too close for comfort. In fact, the NHS's website stated in 2010 that as much as 20% of all Legionnaire's disease cases in the UK can be attributed back to windscreen washing from washer bottles. But the good news is that this is easily avoided, because the Health Protection Agency have also stated that using windscreen additives inside your washer bottles can kill Legionella bacteria, and that's good news because 10% of all infected people actually die from this disease. And so thank you so much for watching this video, and I hope you've gained some knowledge here and that it's helped you. If you do find it has, then please like and subscribe. Thanks for watching.